7 p.m. in London. Rush hour at Lore Restaurant. The kitchen was no longer a place for cooking. It was a battlefield soaked in sweat and screams. The sound of metal clashing against each other was deafening. Clang, crash. Searing heat rose from 16 industrial gas burners, turning this cramped space into a live crematorium. The smell of burnt butter, the fishy smell of poorly prepped fish, and the sour smell of fear exuding from the rookie prep cooks. I stood at the lowest rung of this food chain. The sink. Cloudy, soapy water, floating with grease and leftover food scraps, reached up to my elbows. My skin was wrinkled and pale from soaking in water for too long, but my fingers still moved nimbly, scrubbing, rinsing, stacking plates. A mechanical, soulless rhythm, hiding the hands once known as the golden hands of Paris. Idiot! Gordon's scream rang out, tearing through the noisy air. Gordon was the executive chef, a large man with a flushed face and an ego even bigger than his fat belly. He was standing at the main station, frantically whisking a pot of béarnaise sauce. "Why did it split?" he roared, throwing the whisk onto the slippery tile floor. The sauce in the pot looked lumpy, yellow and greasy, a culinary disaster. He turned to yell at the prep cook standing trembling beside him. "What did you do with the butter? You hated the butter too hot, didn't you?" I glanced over my shoulder. With just one glance, I knew the problem wasn't the butter. The problem was the egg yolks. He had added tarragon vinegar when the yolks weren't fluffy enough. Temperature too low to create an emulsion. I muttered under my breath, a hard-to-break professional habit. Add a spoon of cold water and whisk slowly to save it. Unfortunately, Gordon's ears were as sharp as a hunting dog's. He froze. The whole kitchen suddenly fell silent. Gordon slowly turned his head towards the sink. He walked towards me. The sound of his rubber soles hitting the floor sounded like a sledgehammer. He stopped right in front of me, his breath reeking of cigarettes blowing into my face. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dropping threateningly. "You dishwashing rat." I lowered my head, continuing to scrub the burnt pan. "Nothing, chef." "I asked what you just said," Gordon screamed, grabbing the bucket of dirty floor water right next to my feet. Splash! The stream of cold black water, full of the smell of cleaning chemicals, poured over me. From head to toe. Dirty water dripped down my hair, dripping onto my nose, soaking into my old t-shirt. Giggles rang out from the corners of the kitchen. Public humiliation. "You think you know how to cook?" Gordon sneered, poking his fat index finger at my forehead. "You are just trash, Ryan. Your place is at the sink with the leftovers I throw away. Don't ever let me hear you lecture me about sauce again." I stood still as a statue. Dirty water dripped onto the floor. I didn't wipe my face. I looked up, staring straight into Gordon's eyes. My eyes held no fear, nor any outburst of anger.
It was cold, deep, and contained the ultimate contempt of a master looking at a clumsy apprentice. "Yes, chef," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. "It won't happen again, because next time I won't just speak. I will prove it." Gordon snorted, satisfied, thinking he had crushed me. He turned and walked away, continuing to shout orders to remake the sauce. I watched his back. He held the knife wrong. He tasted with dirty fingertips. He was killing the freshest ingredients in London. And I, Ryan, the legendary ghost, had to stand here watching him destroy my sanctuary. But that's okay. Patience is just like making consommé broth. The lower the heat, the longer it simmers, the purer the sweetness will be when it bursts. I wrung out the rag. The night was still long. 2 a.m. The typical London drizzle covered the city in a gray and gloomy mist. I sat hugging my knees on the back steps of Loire, right next to the large green dumpsters. In my hand was a piece of stale baguette left over from dinner. I tore a small piece, putting it in my mouth. Dry, tasteless. But I closed my eyes, and my imagination began to work. I imagined the richness of pan-seared foie gras, the elegant tartness of raspberry sauce, the crunch of crushed pistachios sprinkled on top. 5 years ago, that was my daily menu. 5 years ago, I wasn't Ryan, the nameless dishwasher. I was the ghost, the name the culinary world whispered with awe. No one knew my face. They only knew the perfect dishes served from a closed kitchen in Paris. I refused every interview. I refused the first Michelin star because I hated ostentation. I just wanted to cook, just wanted to talk to the ingredients. But then, that accident happened. Or rather, betrayal. My closest assistant swapped the sea salt jar with a chemical that temporarily paralyzed taste buds right before the most important competition of my career. I cooked a disastrous meal. I lost all credibility in one night. And worse, I lost faith in people. I fled Paris, drifted to London, burying the name The Ghost under the ashes of the past. Creak. The iron door behind me opened slightly. A rich aroma wafted out, dispelling the smell of garbage. It was the smell of the pumpkin cream soup Gordon had just finished preparing for tomorrow's menu. But it lacked something. My nose twitched slightly. It lacked depth. He only used industrial fresh cream. He forgot to roast the pumpkin with nutmeg before blending. I waited until the sound of the guard's footsteps went away. I stood up, brushing crumbs off my pants. I slipped through the door crack, sneaking into the dark kitchen. Only the refrigerator light cast flickering blue streaks. I walked to the giant soup pot cooling on the stove. I took a clean spoon, tasting it. Bland. Flat. It tasted like dishwater with pumpkin flavor. I sighed. I couldn't stand this insult to culinary art. My hands moved automatically. I opened the spice cabinet. I took out a jar of cinnamon powder, a bit of fresh ginger, and most importantly, a bottle of aged balsamic vinegar hidden deep in the corner of the cabinet. I turned on the low heat. I added spices to the pot. I stirred gently, steadily, clockwise. Blend together. I whispered to the soup pot, "Wake up." The aroma began to change. It became warmer, more complex, more seductive. That was magic. Magic that Gordon could spend his whole life trying to learn and fail. I turned off the stove, wiped the pot rim clean, erased all traces. I returned to being the invisible dishwasher. Tomorrow morning, Gordon would taste this soup. He would be surprised. He would smugly think his skills had improved overnight. He would bring it out to serve customers and receive praise he didn't deserve. I had been doing this for the last 6 months, fixing sauces, rebalancing spices, saving Lore's reputation from the brink of the abyss. Why did I do that? Why did I help the guy who threw dirty water in my face? I looked at my reflection on the stainless steel surface of the refrigerator. Deep-set eyes, stubble. Because I don't cook for him, I told myself. I cook for those customers out there. They are not at fault. They deserve to eat good food. And there is another reason. I am waiting. I heard rumors that Julian Thorne, the harshest food critic in Europe, the man nicknamed Devil's Tongue, was in London. He was the only one who ever tasted the soul in the ghost's dishes back then. If he came here, if he tasted these fixed dishes, he would realize, he would know that the ghost was not dead, that the ghost was still lurking somewhere in this hell's kitchen. I returned to the cold steps, sitting down in the dark. Rain began to fall heavier. I huddled in my thin jacket. But in my head, the gas flame was still burning brightly. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, this play would end. 7:30 p.m. The atmosphere in Lore Restaurant was tense as a string. Not because of the crowd, but because a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom just pulled up in front. The person stepping out wasn't a movie star, nor a politician. It was Julian Thorne, the man nicknamed Devil's Tongue in the European culinary world. He walked into the restaurant with the demeanor of a king going incognito to find an excuse to execute someone. Perfectly tailored black suit, cold ash-gray eyes scanning the dining room like a laser beam. And in his hand was no notebook, just a pristine white silk handkerchief. Rumor had it that if Julian Thorne used that handkerchief to wipe his mouth after eating, that restaurant would keep its Michelin star. And if he left it intact on the table and stood up, that restaurant was considered dead. "Gordon!" The restaurant manager's scream rang in the radio, tearing through the noise of the kitchen. "Thorne is at table number 5. He requested the tasting menu." "And he wants the main course to be the famous orange roasted duck." Gordon was standing tasting the soup pot I secretly fixed last night. He heard the name Thorn and dropped the ladle to the floor. What? His face turned from red to pale white, like a drowned corpse. Thorn, why today? He stammered, sweat starting to pour down his forehead. His hands trembled so much he couldn't hold the carving knife steady. I stood at the sink, observing everything through the misty steam. I knew why Gordon was afraid. Orange roasted duck was the signature dish of Lore. It helped the restaurant win its first Michelin star 2 years ago. But Gordon forgot a small detail. 2 years ago, the person manning the main station cooking that dish wasn't him. It was the old sous chef, whom he fired for daring to ask for a raise. Since then, Gordon always tried to recreate the old flavor, but failed miserably. He often secretly bought high-end canned sauce to remix to fool ordinary diners. But with Julian Thorn, canned sauce was a death sentence. What do I do? What do I do? Gordon paced the kitchen like a wounded animal. I can't cook that dish. I don't remember the Grand Marnier ratio. I'm going to die. He looked around, his eyes frantically searching for a lifebuoy. And his eyes stopped at me. Ryan, the dirty dishwasher, the guy he just threw dirty water at a few hours ago. But he also vaguely remembered one thing. That every time I tinkered with leftovers, their taste was always different. He rushed towards me. He grabbed my soaked collar, dragging me out of the sink. "Follow me," he hissed. Immediately, he dragged me into the hot kitchen area, where the temperature reached 40 degrees Celsius. He pushed me into a hidden corner behind the giant combi oven. This place couldn't be seen from the entrance. "Listen here, you brat," Gordon whispered, his foul breath blowing into my face. "You always brag that you know how to cook, right? Now is your chance. Cook the orange roasted duck for me, right now." I looked at him, my face still strangely calm. "But, Chef," I said slowly, "you said I was just a dishwashing rat. Rats are not allowed to touch VIP guests' food." "Shut up!" Gordon screamed, but then hurriedly lowered his voice for fear of being heard outside. "Don't get smart with me right now. If this duck isn't perfect, if Thorn isn't satisfied, I swear I will make sure you never find a job in this London again. I will frame you for theft, for food poisoning. I will drown you in the mud." He shoved a clean apron into my hand. "Put it on, cook, and remember, you are my shadow. This credit is mine, and if it fails, the fault is yours." I held the pristine white apron in my hand. It was soft and smelled of detergent, completely different from the soaked, smelly clothes I was wearing. I slowly put it on. A familiar feeling rushed back. Like a knight putting on his armor again after years of exile. I tied the apron strings behind my back. Tightened. I looked up at Gordon. "All right, Gordon," I said. "I will cook. But remember this moment well. The moment you handed the knife to me." Gordon didn't understand what I meant.
He only cared about keeping his seat. He ran out the kitchen door, pretending to direct the staff, shouting loudly for Thorn to hear his authority.
And me. I stood alone in the dark corner. In front of me was a fresh Barbary duck on the cutting board. Next to it was a basket of bright yellow Valencia oranges. I closed my eyes for a second. The noise around me vanished. Only me and the ingredients remained. I picked up the knife. The ebony handle fit in my palm like a lost part of my body. I began. Not according to Gordon's recipe, nor according to Lars' old recipe.
I would cook the way of the ghost, the cooking method forgotten 5 years ago. I made a decisive cut on the duck skin. Slice. The sound of the knife cutting into flesh was sweet. I didn't use a non-stick pan. I used an old cast iron pan. I had seasoned it carefully every night. I placed the duck breast into the cold pan, turned on low heat. Let the duck fat melt out slowly, crisping the skin without burning. The slow render technique. Gordon always threw the duck into a scorching hot pan to cook fast, making the meat dry and tough. He was a bad mechanic, and I was an artist. While the duck fat sizzled soothingly, I started making the sauce. I peeled the orange, but didn't take the bitter white pith. I blanched the orange peel in boiling water 3 times to remove the pungent essential oil. I caramelized sugar until it was deep amber, added sherry vinegar, added concentrated duck stock. I secretly simmered it from leftover duck bones last night. And my secret, a bit of star anise and a fragrant roasted Sichuan peppercorn. It would create a 3rd layer of flavor, hidden behind the sour and sweet. A gentle kick to the taste buds, awakening every nerve. Gordon peeked into the kitchen corner. He saw me operating fast as a dance. He saw the flame flare up in the pan when I flambéed with Grand Marnier. He smelled the aroma so seductive it made his mouth water. He was stunned. He had never seen anyone cook like this, including the best chefs he had ever hired. "Done yet?" he whispered, voice trembling with nervousness. "Thorn is waiting for the main course." I didn't answer. I took the duck meat out of the pan. The duck skin was golden, thin and crispy as glass. The meat inside was pink, juicy. I let the meat rest for exactly 4 minutes, the golden time for juices to distribute evenly. Then I sliced it, slice by slice. Perfect. I drizzled the thick, glistening reddish-brown sauce on top, garnished with a few slices of confit orange and a sprig of fresh tarragon. I pushed the plate toward Gordon. "Take it out," I said coldly. "And pray that Thorn's tongue hasn't aged." Gordon looked at the plate like looking at solid gold.
He hurriedly took it, using a towel to wipe the plate rim clean, even though it was already spotless. He adjusted his collar, regaining his usual arrogant look. He walked out of the kitchen, carrying the plate like a trophy. I stood back in the dark. I took off the apron, returned to being Ryan the dishwasher. I leaned against the wall, listening to the sounds from the dining room. I didn't need to look to know what was about to happen. Julian Thorne would cut a piece of meat. He would put it in his mouth, and then the past would rush back to him. A ghost from 5 years ago would appear right on the tip of his tongue. And Gordon? He just signed his own death warrant without knowing it. The waiter placed the plate on table number 5.
Steam rose gently, carrying the scent of citrus, of roasted duck meat, and a hint of mysterious star anise. Julian Thorne didn't pick up the knife immediately. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. His nostrils flared slightly. A frown appeared on his forehead, not a frown of discomfort, but of skepticism. This scent, it was too familiar. It was unlike anything Gordon had cooked in the last 2 years. It was like a memory that had been sleeping for 5 years, suddenly awakened. Thorne picked up the knife and fork. He cut a piece of duck meat. Crack! The sound of crispy skin breaking, a sound as sweet as music. He put the meat in his mouth, chewed slowly. The whole restaurant held its breath, watching. Other diners stopped eating, whispering. Waiters stood pressed against the wall, daring not to breathe loudly. In the kitchen, Gordon was peeking through the swinging door gap, heart pounding like it wanted to jump out of his chest. Thorne swallowed the meat. He put the knife and fork down on the table, took the white silk handkerchief to wipe his mouth. He sat silently for a whole minute, a minute as long as a century. Then he abruptly stood up. The chair was pushed back, creating a loud noise. "Call the executive chef here," Thorne said, voice icy but echoing through the dining room. "Immediately." The manager rushed into the kitchen, face drained of blood. "Gordon, Mr. Thorne is calling you." Gordon adjusted his tall chef's hat. He smoothed his pristine white shirt, even though he hadn't cooked anything. He took a deep breath to regain his fake confidence. "All right," he muttered. "Time to receive the medal." Gordon walked out of the kitchen. He walked with the air of a victorious general, chest puffed out, arrogant smile constant on his lips. He approached table number 5. "Mr. Thorne." Gordon bowed theatrically. "An honor to have you visit Law. How did you find the orange roasted duck? That is a new recipe I just perfected." "Shut up," Thorne interrupted. Gordon froze, smile stiffening. Thorne looked straight into his eyes sharp as a scalpel. "You say this is your recipe?" Of course, sir," Gordon stammered. "I stayed up many nights researching the balance between sour and sweet." Thorne smirked, a contemptuous smile. "Then tell me, Gordon,
What technique did you use to remove the pungency of the orange peel while keeping the essential oil? Gordon swallowed. His eyes darted around. How did Ryan do it? He vaguely remembered Ryan doing something with boiling water.
I soaked it in ice water. Gordon guessed blindly. Ice water helps keep the crispness and removes the smell. Wrong, Thorne said, voice hardening. Continue. What kind of wine did you use to flambe? Cognac, Gordon answered immediately. The finest kind. Wrong! Thorne slammed his hand on the table. The crystal glass bounced. There is no smell of cognac oak in this. This is Grand Marnier combined with a bit of aged sherry.
And most importantly, Thorne stepped closer to Gordon, face close to his. What did you put in the sauce to create this slight, numbing aftertaste on the tip of the tongue? Gordon backed away, sweat pouring down his collar. He panicked to the extreme. He didn't know. He didn't taste the sauce before bringing it out. He only knew Ryan put something in. Is it paprika powder? Gordon guessed. Thorne laughed loudly.
A laugh echoing with bitterness and anger. Paprika? A Michelin chef who can't distinguish between paprika and roasted Sichuan pepper? Thorne turned to look at all the diners who were gaping in surprise. Ladies and gentlemen, the man standing in front of you is a fraud. He didn't cook this dish. He doesn't even understand this dish. Gordon turned purple, trying to salvage the last bit of dignity. Sir, you are slandering me. I am the executive chef. I can sue you. Sue me, Thorne roared. I will show you who should be suing. Thorne pushed Gordon aside. He stormed straight toward the kitchen door. You can't go in there, Gordon screamed, running after to stop him. That is the staff area. But Thorne had pushed the door open hard. The kitchen was silent. All chefs stopped working, looking at the most powerful man in the culinary world who just barged in.
Thorne scanned around. He didn't look at the people standing at the hotline. He looked into the hidden corner, where there were stacks of dirty dishes, and where a skinny man was standing, washing his hands. Me. I looked up. Our eyes met. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the last time I saw those eyes. The eyes of the only person who understood my language through each dish. Thorne walked slowly toward me.
He ignored the filth of the floor, ignored the smell of garbage. He stopped in front of the sink. Ryan, Thorne whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. Is it you, the ghost of Paris? I turned off the tap. I wiped my hands on the white apron, which I hadn't had time to take off. I smiled slightly. Hello, Julian. Long time no see. Gordon rushed in, panting. Kick him out! Security! This dishwasher dared to dress like a chef!
He is crazy. Thorne whipped around, slapped Gordon straight in the face. Smack. The slap was so hard it sent Gordon's chef hat flying to the ground. Shut your mouth immediately, you idiot, Thorne shouted. You dare call the person who cooked that masterpiece a dishwasher? You dare force a genius to stand in this corner? Gordon held his cheek, stunned. The whole kitchen was stunned.
The prep cooks who used to mock me now looked at me like seeing a ghost. I slowly took off the apron. I folded it carefully. I placed it on the clean stainless steel prep table. "Food doesn't lie, Gordon," I said, deep and resonant. "You can wear the chef's jacket. You can stand in the command position. But your tongue, your hands, and your heart," I pointed at his chest, "they are all hollow. You don't cook with love.
You cook with greed, and that is why you always fail." Gordon stepped back, bumping into the refrigerator. He knew it was over. His career, his reputation, all vanished just because of an orange roasted duck. Thorne turned to me, eyes respectful. "Where have you been for the last 5 years, Ryan? I searched all over Europe for you. How bland the culinary world became without the ghost." I looked down at my calloused hands. "I went to find myself again, Julian. I was lost. But thanks to this Hell's Kitchen," I glanced at the trembling Gordon. "I remembered the reason why I started holding a knife. Not for fame, not for Michelin stars, but for the joy of seeing someone close their eyes and smile when tasting my food." Thorne nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You did that tonight, Ryan, and I swear to you,
I won't let your talent be buried in this sink for another second." He turned to the crowd standing stunned outside the kitchen door. Customers had curiously gathered to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne announced loudly, "tonight, Lore will lose its Michelin star because of deceit. But tonight, we have also found a new star, the brightest star I have ever seen. Ryan, the ghost." Applause began to ring out, sporadic at first, then pouring like rain. I stood there in the middle of the chaotic kitchen, not as a dishwasher, but as a chef. And this time, I wouldn't wear a mask anymore. The applause in the dining room gradually subsided, but its echoes still vibrated in the thick air of the kitchen. Gordon collapsed on the cold tile floor. He leaned against the industrial refrigerator, filled with ingredients he never knew how to cherish. The tall chef's hat, his symbol of power, now lay rolling on the ground, smeared with grease. He stared into the void, his eyes hollow, like a fish dead for a long time. He knew tomorrow, when the sun rose, the name Gordon would become a laughingstock in every London food column. Julian Thorne adjusted the silk handkerchief in his suit pocket. He looked at Gordon one last time, with pity for a reject. "I will call the Michelin Guide right now," Thorne said, voice cold and decisive. "Lore will be stripped of the star tomorrow morning, and I will ensure that no reputable restaurant in Europe dares to hire you again, Gordon. Culinary fraud is an unforgivable crime." Gordon didn't answer. He didn't have the strength to justify himself anymore. Thorne turned to me. He pulled from his inner pocket a black business card with gold trim. Simple, elegant,
He gave it to me with both hands. The culinary world has waited for you too long, Ryan, Thorn said gently. Don't make us wait any longer. Call me when you are ready. I will invest in your own restaurant, a place where you can be yourself, not anyone's shadow. I took the card. It felt heavy in my hand. Not the weight of paper, but the weight of the future. Thank you, Julian. I said, I will call. Thorn nodded, smiled with satisfaction, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. The crowd of curious diners also gradually dispersed, leaving the inherent quiet space. I looked around the kitchen one last time, looked at the sink full of dirty water, where I buried 5 years of youth, looked at the stacks of unwashed, dirty dishes, looked at Gordon's knife still lying on the cutting board. I didn't feel regret. I only felt relief. I walked to the locker in the corner of the room, took my old jacket. I didn't change clothes. I still wore the soaked, dirty clothes underneath, because I wanted to carry this stench out there, let the London night wind wash it away, to remind me of where I stood up from. I walked out the back door. The rain had completely stopped. The air after the rain was fresh and sharp cold, rushing straight into my lungs. I took a deep breath. The smell of damp earth, the smell of leaves, and the smell of freedom. I looked up at the night sky. The dark clouds had vanished, revealing twinkling stars. I remembered Thorn's words, the brightest star I have ever seen. I smiled, this time a real smile. I threw the dishwasher staff card into the roadside trash can. Clack! The sound ending a dark old chapter. I walked on the empty street, the yellow streetlight stretching my shadow on the ground. That shadow no longer huddled, bowing head. It stood straight, steady. Tomorrow I will call Thorn. Tomorrow I will find a location. I will build a kitchen of my own, where there is no deceit, where there is only absolute honesty between the cook and the food. And what will the restaurant name be? I thought for a moment. The Phoenix? No, too cheesy. Resurrection? Too showy. I stopped in front of a puddle, looking at my reflection. My eyes shone brightly in the night. I knew what I would name it. L'ombre, the shadow, to remind the world that the brightest light is always born from within the darkness. And the best food always comes from those who know to listen to the voice of ingredients in silence. I put my hands in my pockets, walking faster forward. Dawn is coming.